Okay, while we are waiting for other people to enter, I can slowly start. It is 1 minute past 7. We are very pleased to see so many people signed up for this webinar. The name of this, welcome to all of you. The name of this webinar is Home Energy Retrofitting, Your House, Your Neighbor's House, and the 350 Mass Campaign. So while people enter, I can slowly start to introduce this webinar. It is organized by the Science Working Group of 350 Mass. This working group not only focuses on the scientific aspects of climate change and greenhouse gas mitigation, but also on communication. It supports the 22-23 campaign, Bringing the Green New Deal Home, a comprehensive campaign organized by 350 Mass and coordinated with other climate movement partners to rapidly reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the Massachusetts economy, and to do so while prioritizing social, racial, and economic justice. End of quote. Mark Dijen will talk later more about this. My name is Philip Vergracht. I'm the chair of the Science Working Group and a member of 350 Mass Newton Node, and I will be your moderator tonight. Evan Bell will handle the technicalities, and Ralph Halpern will assist with the Q&A. This meeting will be recorded, is already recorded, and the recording will be on the 350 Mass website after a few days. So the proceedings for tonight are as follows. We have 4 short presentations by our 4 speakers, by our 4 wonderful speakers that are very much welcome. I will introduce them in a moment. During these presentations, they are back-to-back without pause. During the presentations, you can enter your questions in the chat box. And after the presentations, Ralph will read them out and they will be discussed. Also, if you have a very urgent question, you can raise your hand and we will see how we handle that with so many people. We are very pleased that there are already 63 people at this moment and counting. After the Q&A answers, we will handle the hands up also. The aim of this webinar is to support 350 Mass members and other attendees with decisions to retrofit their own homes, as well as encouraging others in our community to retrofit their homes. So speaker will also address the systemic changes required to achieve large-scale equitable housing electrification and insulation, and the political and legislative efforts of our 350 Mass statewide campaign. So let me now introduce the 4 speakers. First of all, we have Sabrine Shangbong. We are very pleased to have you here, Sabrine. She's a journalist of the Boston Globe. She has written extensively on climate change, especially on state-level action and policies, as part of the Boston Globe's recently launched Into the Red vertical. She joined the Boston Globe in May of last year after reporting for 8 years at Inside Climate News, where she covered the Arctic. She's focusing on climate accountability, looking at the state's legally mentally climate targets, its progress towards those goals and the hurdles. Then we will have John Klein, homeowner in Newton, member of the Newton Citizens Commission on Energy. His title is The Fastest, Easiest Way to Whole House Heat Pumps. As a member of the Newton Energy Commission, John has been deeply involved in many of Newton's recent climate initiatives, including the development of the Newton Climate Action Plan and the campaign Newton Power Choice. For John, moving to heat pumps was remarkably fast and cost-effective. He will explain what it was about his house that made it so easy, whether you can have the same experience, and the 5 things to keep in mind if you move ahead. As a profession, John consults with emerging technology companies on accelerating the adoption of their products. Then we have another homeowner, David Green, the founder of Zero Carbon LLC, consultant to homeowners, founding and CEO of BioStage, has a degree in physics from Oxford University and an MBA from Harvard Business School. He earlier retired his career in biotechnology. He founded 2 companies, was CEO of both and took both public. and then worked as a volunteer helping people cut their carbon footprints. And recently he has again a CEO of a biogen company, I understand. He's a frequent speaker, he has published the book Zero Carbon at Home, and maintains the website Zero Carbon Home. And then last but not least, Mark Dian, member of the 350 MAS statewide steering team and the statewide legislative team. He's an expert in residential energy efficiency program design. He helped found and lead conservation service group beginning in the 1980s and has overseen major residential efficiency programs in several states and in Canada, including helping design the MAS-SAFE program for National Grid and Eversource. He's a leader of the 350 MAS campaign, Bring the Green New Deal Home. And with this, sorry for my long introduction, I'm very happy to give the floor to Sabrina.
Well, thank you so much, Philip. I really appreciate the introduction, and I'm just, thankful that you all invited me here tonight. This is super fun for me. I love getting to talk about the work that we're doing at the Boston Globe. As Philip mentioned, I joined the Globe in May and started behind the scenes doing the work that we would only officially launch months later, which is our Into the Red initiative. So that includes myself and one other new hire joining some existing fantastic reporters at the Globe newsroom and really leaning into climate change coverage, which it has manifested in a lot of different ways that hopefully you've already seen in terms of explaining climate change in the world around us that we're already seeing. My colleague Darna just had a great story about how climate change is making potholes worse. She also covered the IPCC report. I'm sticking mostly with the accountability side of things, which is really the space that I've lived in as a journalist for the last decade or so. David Abel is continuing his wonderful work, and we're also joined by a reporter from the business desk, Janelle Nanos, who is looking at the relationship between retail and climate change, although she's on a different project, so you won't see much from her for another month or two, but look forward to that. One of our big goals is to make the climate change story local, because as we've seen at the COP meetings, as we've seen in national negotiations and attempts to pass big legislation, there's not a lot of power that we have in those arenas other than voting when we can. But when it comes to the local side of action, that's, as you well know, that's where you can really make a difference. And so we're trying to bring this story down locally. So not long after I got to the Globe in May, I was talking to a source and she said, well, here's something messed up about Massachusetts. She was like, we have one tool to get people to electrify their homes, but we're using it in part to incentivize the purchase of fossil fuel appliances. Isn't that crazy? And I was like, she obviously must have this wrong. That sounds absurd in a state like Massachusetts, but lo and behold, it was not absurd. She was absolutely correct, or I guess it is absurd, but she was correct about it. And so that began my reporting on the MassSAFE program. And it's been remarkable to see the differences between, where we are right now compared to when I started reporting on this in the spring. And that's because of some of the requirements of the climate legislation that passed, that mandated that program be used to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions in a very concrete way. But to see it play out in this now DPU approved program has been really kind of amazing to see just how much progress can happen in a short period of time, which isn't to say that from a climate change perspective, it's perfect. There's a lot of room yet to be, work to be done. But it's really interesting. And now, of course, we have to see, as the rubber meets the road, does it actually work out as it's being purported to? But there are all these, when, talking about systemic things that have to happen, there are all these processes underway in Massachusetts that many of you are probably quite familiar with. But when it comes to the utilities and the Department of Public Utilities thinking about charting the future of gas in the state and what that looks like, when it comes to the first ever Clean Heat Commission, which is currently working on coming up with a set of recommendations, when it comes to the stretch net zero building code that was recently released, which many folks were disappointed to see continues to allow some fossil fuels to be built. There are all these processes, and so this represents this incredibly critical moment. The state is required to get to 50% reductions by the end of this decade, which is like a heartbeat away. But progress is alarmingly slow. And yet there is all this work that individuals can do. And I always feel torn talking about what individuals can do when it comes to climate change, because climate change is not an individual problem. It is a systemic problem. We did not create the system that we're living in, but we are living in this system. And the fact of the matter is there are things that we can do, whether that's people who are, have the means to do it, looking to electrify their homes, electrifying their vehicles, whether it's working to push policies that will help so that everybody can be a part of the transition. And those same things can be made available in environmental justice communities and to low and moderate income folks. There is actually quite a bit of work that can be done. And that's part of what makes this, I think, so challenging and also so interesting, in kind of journalistically interesting, and then personally a little terrifying, I would say, because we have so far to go. But, I hear from folks all the time, especially when I write stories about heat pumps with their own experiences. And it really runs the gamut. Some folks are telling me, I've had the most incredible experience, switch to heat pumps. It's so cool in the summer. We're toasty warm in the winter, whatever. I feel great about our environmental impact, and we're not paying out the nose. Other people have had really problematic experiences. And in part, I think that has to do with contractor education and contractors really not knowing necessarily all of the things that they need to know in order to really successfully retrofit a home so that it can be made ready for heat pumps. Every expert I've talked to has said they've never seen a home that couldn't be converted off of fossil fuels. But there might be some more work to do in some homes rather than others. And Massachusetts obviously has quite a healthy stock of, old, interesting homes that present more challenges. But I think a lot from what I'm learning in my reporting comes down to education, both for homeowners and for contractors. And removing the barriers for that. One of the more alarming things or surprising things that I found in some of my Mass Save reporting was to see that there was a note on the form you fill out so that you can get your rebate that said in small writing that Mass Save did not recommend a whole home conversion off of fossil fuels. I have been told by Mass Save that note will no longer exist going forward, or maybe it doesn't already as of the beginning of this year. But that's the message we were sending out. The one tool that the state had to get people to electrify their homes was at the same time suggesting to them that it was perhaps not a great idea, which I think is a sign of just how far we have to go still. But I'm looking forward myself to learning more tonight too. And I'm also looking forward to your questions. So thanks again for having me, and I'll pass it off. I think I'm passing it to John. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Sabrina. John.
Yes. Go ahead and share my slides.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to assume everybody can see my slides.
Yep.
Yes, excellent.
Yes.
Sabrina, there's a couple of things in your conversation which really resonated for me. First is back to this notion that some people have really great experiences and some people have not so good experiences. I have seen both. I was lucky to be on the easy side of things. And in fact, it couldn't have gone any better. And there were a number of things about my project that made that a reality. So I really want to go through and talk about what it is that made our system so easy versus others. And the second thing you talked about was really that contractor education. I've got a great slide in here which will show you sort of exactly what that is. Because even though looking back on it, my project was really easy, as I was going through it the first time, it took me 2 or 3 years to actually figure it out and get it done. So despite all of that, so I'm hoping that the next person who does this doesn't go through the same problems I had. Good. So this is a picture of my house. It is a 6-bedroom, 3.5 bath, 2,660 square feet. If that sounds like not a lot of square footage for 6 bedrooms, you'd be correct. We've got a lot of very small bedrooms, but great for guests, visitors, and so forth. House was built in 1918. The previous owners renovated it in 1986, and then they renovated it again in 2003, just before we bought it. So we actually, when I moved in, we had very modern systems, and the whole thing had been renovated. So we had a gas boiler, not a furnace, but a boiler that had been in place since 1997. That connected to a water storage tank. And so because the water was heated by the boiler and stored in the storage tank, it doesn't have any independent heating. We had to replace in 2012. On the other side, we also had central air. So there were 2 units, one for the first floor and then a larger one for the second and third with air handlers. We had baseboard radiator heating for the heat, and then we had these high-speed ducts for they're small, little small tubes for the air conditioning. So in 1918, and even in the renovation, there was no, obviously they didn't outfit it with ducting. So the only way to fit it is putting in these little kind of 4-inch ducts that really blow high-speed air through the system. So that's what we were living with. And I got involved and really wanted to get a heat pump. So the first thing to come in mind is that when I walked into it, I was thinking, oh, I want to put in heat pumps. I need to replace my furnace or my boiler. Heat boiler made total sense. So I started looking into how do you replace a boiler? What do I do with the distribution system, which was these baseboard radiators? And what I discovered is there was just no way to do that. We looked into geothermal. We got a quote. It was over $100,000. Digging the well alone was like 35 or 40. What I also looked at is whether there were air to water heat pumps. They now actually are just coming onto the market, but even a few years ago, those didn't exist. And the goal would be is to take an air source heat pump, and instead of blowing hot air, instead it would heat the water that's used in the distribution system. What I could have done at that time is I could have gone ahead and put in mini splits all over the house, which somebody actually recommended. But then I would still have needed the boiler. Plus, I would have started and had mini splits all over my house, which was not really sort of a great option. So it just didn't look practical, and decided that my house wasn't really meant for heat pumps. Fast forward to the end of 2018. And our first floor air conditioning needed Freon, and we refilled it. And then start of 2019, we turned on the air conditioning again, and all the Freon was gone. And what they said is that the system had corrosion in it. There were leaks in the system. They could refill it one more time, but of course it was going to leak out again by the end of the summer. And then we'd be in the same position next year, but there's now a ban starting in 2020 on Freon. So that would no longer be an option. So I could have bought one more season at the cost of releasing all that Freon into the atmosphere. And instead we said, okay, it's time to replace the air conditioner. And that's really sort of when the light bulb went off. When I started going through this process of replacing my air conditioner, it turns out that if you have central air conditioning, the time to get heat pumps is not when you're replacing your furnace or your boiler. It's when you're replacing your central air conditioning. Because essentially a heat pump is just an air conditioner that runs in both directions. You pull out the old cool only air conditioners, you put in a heat pump into the same exact place, and all of a sudden you've got a heat pump. And that's actually what makes it so incredibly easy for our project. Now, that sounds easy, but let me walk you through the process to get there. So contractor number one, and this is, in 2019, oh, I'm going to put mini splits all over your house. You want heat pumps. Why? Because that contractor didn't know anything about central heat pumps. All they knew was mini splits. We then got the second contractor, which is the one we've been using for 15 years to service our equipment. And they said, nah, you really can't have a heat pump. You should just go ahead and replace an air conditioner with another air conditioner. And ultimately, what we decided was that the line of Carrier heat pumps that they carried would just not work for our application. And then finally, we got to Rodenheiser, and I'm giving them the recognition because they did a really great job. And the line that they carried, Bosch, actually did everything we wanted. So they came in and showed me exactly what I wanted. And this is what they quoted us. So there's a couple of things that are sort of important on this slide. One less important to everybody else, but was very important to me, was adding and extending the ductwork, solving a couple of the problems we had. But then we used what they called the Green Plus, which, as I get into it for a second, as I talk about sort of what that means, is two things. So first is, it's a variable speed heat pump. And so that was a decision that probably at the time cost me $6,000 or $7,000 extra versus single speed heat pump. And a variable speed heat pump runs on high and low. And when it's running on low, it's blowing air just very slowly. And it's has two benefits. First is it's not very noisy because it's not blowing much air. The second part of it is, one of the issues you have with heat pumps is getting the sizing right, because if you make them too big, they cycle on and off and on and off, and you lose all your efficiency. By having a low speed, it's just always running at low speed, except when it needs to bounce up to the high speed in order to, because you have a big gap in temperature or it's just taking too long to get there. But really an important feature, and one I highly recommend. The other feature we got is the automatic switch over from heat pumps to gas. And so what our system does, and we got to choose the temperature, is use gas when gas is most cost effective at really low temperatures, use electric when it's really more cost effective to use electric. And then based on full fuel costs, this is adjustable. So it's not the easiest thing to adjust. But one of the things is right now ours is set to 32 degrees, where probably the break-even point is probably 35 degrees, but we decided to set it for 32. As the cost of electricity and gas get closer in line, that number is going to go down. And so we can use more and more electric over time without spending, and actually without spending a lot on extra on cost of electric. And so one of the things that makes ours very cost effective is that we are not using electricity at low temperatures when it's extremely ineffective. And so our heating and cooling costs, our net costs, haven't changed at all with the heat pump, which is one of the things you often hear. The last thing is that our old air conditioning system was very noisy, and it's really because they didn't put enough of these low-speed ducts in. And so one of the things they fixed when they got this project was to actually add more ducts. It spreads out the pressure and just made the entire having the experience much, much better. So all the way around, it was pretty straightforward. Just from a physics standpoint, so thermodynamics, which drives the use of heat pumps are measured by something called a coefficient of performance. And what it measures is you put, for every unit of energy you put in, how many units of energy of heat do you get back into your house? And so with a heat pump at high temperatures, you can get a coefficient performance of 4 or 5. The break-even point is about 3. When you're down at like 10 degrees, your coefficient of performance is like 1.1, and therefore it's really, really expensive. And so we set ours, I said at 35 degrees is really the break even. We set ours at 32, or at least it was a couple of years ago. We are operating on electric when it's above 35 degrees. We're operating on gas when it's below. And again, as if we want to spend more, we can certainly do that. There are more cost-effective ways of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. If we want to As the prices change, we can bring that number down and get more and more gas reduction, but it really gives you the flexibility to control cost and emissions the way that you want to do it. The other part of it is installation was super easy. So what you're looking at are the 2 condensers for the new heat pump. The new heat pumps, that's exactly what it looked like, other than the units were older, when we had our old air conditioners. They literally picked them up, put them down in the same spot, disconnected the electricity, reconnected the electricity, and we were ready to go. And so our project, the only thing that caused our project any delay at all was we were the 2nd house in Massachusetts to get this particular unit. And so they had to have the manufacturer send somebody out to get it all configured. And that took a couple extra weeks because they were struggling through it the first couple of times. But other than that, it was seamless. They came in, they did them. Once they got it set up, we've never had a moment's problem with it. House is, as I think you said, Sabrina, toasty in the winter, cool and comfortable in the summer. So it's just been amazing. We did go to Mass Save. We got a $25,000 5-year interest-free loan for doing this. One of the things that certainly has been adjusted is that as part of the new program is they're now offering incentives for heat pumps, but not traditional air conditioners. And so the cost difference between doing heat pumps, where I spent $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 more to get heat pumps, that price difference has disappeared. In our case, we did not need any insulation or building envelope opportunities. So that was our experience. And overall, it's been great. And it's only gotten more cost effective. They've only gotten better at it. If you have the right situation and you have the right contractor, this is a simple thing to do and you're going to have great results and not spend any more money.
Thank you very much, John. And people, don't forget to put your questions in the chat box if you have them. So David, you're next.
Okay, thank you, John. So I would just like to say, John and I have never met, okay, but we've had very similar experience, eerily similar experience on the heat pumps, down to the point of even using the same contractor. I used Rodenheiser for mine. I even used the same manufacturer, which is Bosch. So that's on my house, and I'll show you. Also, I have a rental property where we've also installed heat pumps, and that property has Mitsubishi heat pumps. There is no ductwork there, so that's a ductless system. So we've got all 3 systems here. John has the high velocity air distribution. I have in my own home, I have the low velocity traditional ductwork, and at our rental property, we have the Mitsubishi ductless heat pump. So between the 2 of us, we've got most of the bases covered here. So let me just go through my presentation. My presentation is going to cover more territory than just heat pumps. I'm also going to cover insulation and triple glazed windows and solar panels as well. The other bits that can put together to get your home to 0 carbon footprint. Our home has a 0 carbon footprint. Let me just show you how we did this. Oh, sorry, I need to share the screen, don't I? How about that? Can you see my graph now? Yeah, great, I'm getting nods. Okay, so this is the carbon footprint of our house. It was about 30 to 35 tons. That's an enormous amount of carbon dioxide each year back in 2014, 2015, 2016. At the end of 2016, I added solar panels on the roof of the house, and I added heat pumps just like John did. We took away the air conditioners. I did not replace my furnace. I still have my furnace, just like John still has his natural gas furnace. I still have my old dinosaur 1974 oil-fired furnace. But I kept that, and I added the heat pumps to replace my air conditioning units, which had died, just like John's had. And that combination of the solar panels plus the heat pumps cut our carbon footprint by about 20 tons per year, or about 2/3. And then at the end of 2017, I had insulation on the roof of my house, or a flat roof, I'll show you in a minute, and the ceiling of my basement. We had just open rafters, and I put fiberglass in there myself, and that cut the carbon footprint another 50%, from about 10 tons to about 5 tons. And then at 5 tons, I was like, hey, this is kind of cool. I had no idea I could cut my carbon footprint this much. So I said, well, maybe I can just push this a bit further. And so I added an additional solar panel array. Sorry, let me get rid of this. Additional solar panel array on the top of my garage at the end of 2018. And that eliminated all of our electricity usage because I've now generated all by solar panels. And that electricity is now used to heat my house through the heat pumps that John just described. So we've cut out 35 tons of carbon dioxide emissions every year. Every year, it's each year, it's every, and it's forever. There will never be carbon emissions from my house again. Now, I was very surprised at being able to do this. When I read the blogs and the books in the library, well, there weren't any books in the library. When I read the blogs and stuff, people said you can't do this on a retrofit. It's impossible. You can do this on new construction when you get everything super tight and everything, but you can't do this on a retrofit. Well, it's wrong. You can. And so it surprised me to get to zero. What surprised me even more is how much money I'm saving. So this is my bills for heating oil and electricity. It was about $8,000 a year for heating oil, about $3,000 a year for electricity back in 2014, cut following the installation of the heat pumps and the solar panels in 2017, then the installation of the triple glazed windows in 2018, and the extra solar panels pushed us down to zero, and actually slightly below zero. I get credits from Eversource on this in 2019. So how do we do it? 4 things: heat pumps, insulation, triple glazed windows, and solar panels. Those are the 4 things we added. What I didn't do is just as interesting as what I did do. What I didn't do was geothermal. As John found out, I found exactly the same thing. My quote, John, was $98,000. Yours was $100,000. Same thing, right? It's so expensive to dig the wells, it makes no economic sense. It does cut your carbon footprint, but it costs you a fortune to do it. So I did not do geothermal. I did not do solar hot water panels. They don't work in the wintertime, just to let you know. I didn't do a super tight building envelope, which is also conventional wisdom in the whole sort of net zero green builder community. My house is reasonably tight, but it's not super tight. And yet I still have a zero carbon footprint. And so there's a lot of things I didn't do that are common conventional wisdom. I'm a business guy by training, as well as being a physicist by training. So I did all my analysis financially. I've got spreadsheets up the wazoo, calculating all these things like cuts in carbon footprint and return on investment. So this is what happened for our heat pumps. Okay, this is the biggest single cause of cutting our carbon footprint. It almost halved it, about 20 tons of carbon dioxide a year, saving us $3,000 a year. Now that's the reduction in the oil heat plus the additional cost of electricity needed to run the heat pumps. This is the net cost of what I'm saving. Cost me $26,000, a bit more than what John spent. I got a slightly bigger house. It pays for itself in 9 years. That's a return on investment of 9%. That's 9% after tax, and it will not go up. So what people are facing right now is huge increases in electricity bills and natural gas bills and heating oil bills and even gasoline bills because of what's going on in Europe right now in Ukraine, and Vladimir Putin's messing with the energy supplies in Europe, which affects the whole world. So my energy bill is zero. It's zero this year. It was zero last year. I'm not being affected by the increase in natural gas prices or even gasoline prices. I now have a test and I charge that from my solar panels too. So this is a huge money saving, as well as insulating you from inflation, as well as cutting your carbon footprint. Just like John, these are our air conditioning units. So these are our heat pumps. They replaced our air conditioning units. They literally took away the old ones, put in the new ones, plugged them into the same breakers in the breaker box, and they did some cabling to fit it all in. But it was really very easy, as John said, to do this. And as John mentioned, these are just two-way air conditioners. In the summertime, they cool the house down. In the wintertime, the circuit is reversed and they heat the house up. And when they heat with 2.5 times the efficiency of a furnace or boiler. When they cool with the same efficiency as an AC unit. When they in heating mode, it's this 2.5 times gain in heating efficiency, which is the magic of a heat pump that allows you to cut your carbon footprint and cut your utility bills at the same time. Next, insulation. So this cut about 7 tons of carbon dioxide a year, about 16%, saving me more money than what I'm saving from the heat pumps, but it cost me $1,000 compared to $26,000. So huge difference in return on investment, pays for itself in about 2 or 3 months, return on investment over 100% per year, far better than my 401k. Don't know about you guys, but that's a really good return on investment. This is what we did. This is our flat roof on the left-hand side here. And you can see the rafters there. There's 10 inches of fiberglass and 2 layers of 2-inch isoboard. The fiberglass is about R30. Insulation is measured in R values. The more, the better. And then each isoboard is about R10. 2 is R20. So you've got R50 in the roof. That's a very well insulated roof. Look at the ceiling of my basement. There was nothing there where that fiberglass is today. I just bought this from a local hardware store and just pushed it up into the rafters myself. Took me a weekend to do this over the whole of my 2,000 square foot basement. 12 inches of fiberglass, added R38. So now my house is nice and warm on the top and the bottom, keeping all the heat inside in the wintertime and keeping all the heat outside in the summertime, so I need to use less air conditioning. Insulation, as John, I think, mentioned, this is heavily subsidized in Massachusetts. And by the way, it's subsidized because you're paying for it already. You're paying for this on your electricity bill. So if you're not using MassSave, you're just subsidizing your neighbor. So don't let that happen. Make sure you get this. They will pay 75% of the cost of insulation up to $2,000 and 100% of the cost of draft sealing, which is a big way of losing your heat. They will not pay for spray foam. They only pay for blown-in cellulose and fiberglass. So insulation is the lowest hanging, ripest fruit in the garden. There's a picture of my peaches on my trees in summertime. You can see they're going way down, right to the grass there. This is the lowest hanging, ripest fruit. Please pick it by the bushel. Okay, triple glazed windows. We had ancient 1974 vintage double glazed, and some of them were single glazed windows. We replaced them all with triple glazed windows. This will never make money for you if you are not replacing your windows for other reasons. It's far too expensive to replace windows just to rip out perfectly good double glazed and replace them with triple glazed. But if you're replacing them anyway, which we were because ours were falling apart, then it makes far better sense to replace them with triple glazed than with double glazed. Triple glazed is only about 5% more than the cost of double glazed. Why? Because the bulk of the cost is actually the installation cost, not the window itself. And the cost of the window is mostly the frame and the wood you choose for the frame and the mechanism. It's not the glass. Adding a third sheet of glass is actually very little extra cost compared to having 2 sheets in there already. So this cut our carbon footprint about 5%, about 2 tons, saves us about $1,000 a year. That's again the incremental cost over double glazed windows, the savings over double glazed windows, and the incremental cost over the cost of having done it with double glazed windows. Pays for itself in 4 years, return on investment 19% after tax. These are our old double and single glazed windows. You can see the one on the right there was actually covered up with duct tape because it was leaking and it moved in the frame. Our new windows I don't have a picture of. This is a very short version of my presentation, by the way. There's only about 10 slides here. I have a full version of this on YouTube. You can download my slides from my website for free. And everyone who wants to will get a copy of my book for free as well. I've written a book about how to do this. And that's got much better pictures in there of like what the new windows look like compared to the old ones. Okay, moving on, solar panels. So this was the second biggest cut in our carbon footprint, about a third, 14 tons a year. The most expensive, $42,000, a lot of money, but it saves us a lot of money too, $5,500 a year. Pays for itself in 7 years, 13% return on investment, again, after tax, index for inflation, no asset under management fees, very, very good investment. And the levelized cost of electricity, which is the way of measuring your cost per kilowatt hour by taking the whole cost of the system and dividing it by the number of kilowatt hours it produces, is between 5 and 8 cents per kilowatt hour. Eversource and National Grid are currently charging you 23. They will shortly be charging you 29 because of the increase in the cost of natural gas, which sets the price of electricity in Massachusetts. So this is a huge benefit, cutting your carbon footprint and cutting your bills significantly. So let me just summarize then. These are the 4 things I did: heat pumps, insulation, solar panels, and triple glazed windows. You can see the money saved, each one, and then the amount of carbon reduction in the second column. This really delivers the triple bottom line: 0 pollution for the people, 0 carbon for the planet, and 0 bills for your own back pocket. So you can take a photograph of this slide if you want, or maybe we can put this in the chat or something, but there's tons of free stuff available on my website. As Philip mentioned, I'm a retired biotech CEO. I've sort of done this on the side. I don't do this to make money. There's a PDF of all the slides for this webinar, which includes the whole deck, which is about 45 slides long. There's a YouTube recording of a previous webinar, which is the whole 45-minute webinar, if you want to watch that. There are searchable written questions and answers on my website. This is a really good source of information. These are all questions asked by people on webinars like this that I wrote up answers to. They're all posted on the website. You can read them at your leisure. Really good nitty-gritty detail that's not in this concept about, okay, heat pumps are good, solar panels are good, but like really nitty-gritty detail about how do you actually get this done. And the free book you can get by going to my website, Green Zero Carbon Home, and use the code 350 for 350 Massachusetts. Occasionally this does not work. There's an iPad version and a Kindle version. You can get whichever one you want. Occasionally this doesn't work. If it doesn't work, email me. My email address at the bottom here, dgreen@greenzerocarbon.com, because I can email you the file. But please try to get it from the website first, because it would take me forever to try to email it for everyone. There are paperbacks available, but they're not for free. You have to buy those. It costs me real money to print them. And I wrote this short version called the Stuck at Home COVID-19 edition, which you can get for free too. Use the code COVID-19, which is 4 things you can do at home that are very effective and very cost effective, as well as very carbon effective, that you can actually do while you're stuck at home with COVID-19, which is a bit out of date these days, but there you go. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll be happy to take questions either now or Philip, if you want to do it later on, that's totally fine too.
Thank you so much, David. And we really appreciate that your 45-minute presentation, you boiled down till slightly more than 10 minutes. That's a great achievement. Thank you. So we heard now these 2 great presentations of the homeowners who are sharing their great experiences with you. So why don't we not all do it? Well, there are all kinds of practical hurdles and etc. We would like to take it back to the systemic level, to the level of the state, to the legislation and the mandates, and also to what 350 Mass is doing in terms of a campaign to make this all happen for all of us. So Mark Dyan, the floor is yours. You're muted.
Unusually.
Yes.
Yeah, now I'm less muted.
There you are.
So, I mean, part of me says we should handle the technical questions now, but that's not the agenda. So what you've just heard, the last 2 speakers, are describing a process of going from, I'd like to do this, to getting it done. And it is the process that if we're going to meet our goals, the state's goals of getting to net zero emissions by 2050 and getting halfway there by 2030, has to happen to get the 2030 goals. What these gentlemen have just described has to happen in somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million homes in the next 8 years. And these, David and John, are perfect examples of what can be done and why it won't work without policy. Because both of them, John is great, and I did not know what they were going to say. John describes this system, which is the ideal, what's called hybrid system. It's self-adjusting. You could set the price and so on. And as he said, he was getting the second, was it the second one that was installed, third one that was installed in the United States at that time. And the company, which is in Germany, had to send somebody over to set up the system. That's a really good experience, but it is not replicable at the rate of 100,000 a year in this state. David, right, described the process. It took several years. It took a significant amount of money. He was tracking it as he went along, and he was getting, he got, by the way, David, you got some air sealing by putting in that rigid insulation, even though you didn't think of it as that.
Yeah.
So you've got what is probably a very tight house, certainly on the top and the bottom, with an idea, with a great system. But if you think about policy-wise, how do we get approximately 100,000 homeowners and tenants to do this a year until we run out of houses, or at least, you know, until we do the first, all the ones that are not heated by electricity right now, which is something over 2 million. It's not going to work. What you need is a policy where, and ideally, I'll talk about 2 things. One is you ought to be able to call 1-800-MASS-SAVE and have somebody who's just as good as these 2 guys are at walking you through the system, who's on the other end of the phone, or will come out to the house and help you do it. Because it's a complex system that you have to change in your house, and that's the only way it's going to happen. Well, if you call Mass-Save and ask them, I believe they have dropped the "we don't recommend it" part, which Sabrina had, which was infuriatingly part of their policy for the past, well, for the past while, but certainly for the past 3 or 4 years when it shouldn't have been. They do not have these sort of multi-process experts available. They have very good energy auditors who can come out and tell you how to insulate and air seal your house, which is what Mass Save was set up to do. But they have not made the transition to having this kind of multi-dimensional approach to the housing yet. Why not? Partly it's inertia. Inertia is a powerful physical force and it works in businesses as well. And partly it's a division in the house. That is, electrifying everything, which is what these folks have done, is really great for electric companies. And it's really bad for gas companies, right? Because the carbon emissions that David and John reduced were reduced by reducing their gas use or their oil use. But in something over 50% of the homes in Massachusetts, it's gas use. And it's the same companies. It's the same companies. So there is both general inertia and a particular inertia that comes from having a division in the house. So one of the things that we and others are working on is trying to push, pull, cajole Mass Save into getting with the program, which is to offer a comprehensive service so that when you get an audit or a home energy assessment, as it's supposed to be called, the home energy assessment includes at least an outline of a plan of how to get from where you are to where David and John have gotten to get to zero emissions. That plan, you can't get it right now. Call them up, try it and ask and you'll see. But they have to do that. The second thing they have to do, and what David and John were able to do themselves, was to find reliable contractors and in a sense do their own quality assurance. That's one of the main features that Mass Save is supposed to do. And they do it pretty well on insulation and air sealing, which is their core business. But they have not produced, they haven't got the integrated energy auditors yet. They haven't got the integrated contractor list. And the last thing that Mass Save does is that they provide quality assurance throughout the process for the things that they do well. But they haven't set that up for this future thing. So actually, you're only supposed to do 3 things each time, but here's the 4th. They have not integrated the concept of generating your own electricity, i.e. the solar panels that David so eloquently described, which are sort of the turnkey that gets you from nearly zero to zero. Again, partly out of inertia, but partly because of what we believe is to be let's see, what's the nice way to put this? The Department of Public Utilities has interpreted current law to say that Mass Save cannot do that kind of fuel switching from power purchase from utility to power you generate yourself. That's not the way we read the law, but that's the way they read the law. And at the moment, that they're running the show. So 350 and others are working to change the law to make it explicit that as the Commonwealth moves from what it's doing now to net zero energy, we want to encourage people either individually or in their communities to get solar and get off the grid as a central source of power. That is a big political lift. So one of the key things that we and others are working on is an attempt to get Mass Save, in a sense, to get with the program. And to do that, we have to get the Department of Public Utilities to get with the program as well. So we have put forward legislation to set the 1 million homes goal in 10 years into state law and to push the DPU to get Mass Save to do the features that I've just described. And I want to change the topic a little bit because politics is both push and pull. There's an interesting thing that's happened over the last 4 months that has changed our perspective a little bit. 4 months ago, the gas companies got a significant increase in the price of gas, well before the outbreak of war in the Ukraine, on the basis of the increased purchase cost of gas in the United States. That's one decision. Second decision is that the Department of the ISO New England, which is the body that regulates the electric grid in New England, decided to keep a rule in place. And the rule is for new power, it's a minimum offer rule. And the basically they said when they bid future electric costs, and you're wondering why your bills are going up, they kept a rule which said you cannot bid below a certain price. Even if these are independent electric companies, generating companies. The reason they did that was that renewable energy was coming in so cheap that it would put some of the gas generators out of business. So they have a minimum offer rule.
Isn't that the point, Mark?
What?
Isn't that the point? Put some of the gas companies out of business? Isn't that the point?
I kind of thought so, but they don't seem to. So that's number 2. Rate increase, minimum offer rule. Then we had a sequence of things from the administration. Department of Energy Resources came out with the draft new construction code that what was supposed to be the net zero energy code. There was supposed to be a stretch code that would allow towns to go to zero. And they decided at the last minute they wouldn't quite go to zero. That they would allow, but not require. They would allow the continued use in new buildings of oil and gas furnaces and boilers, although the buildings have to be more efficient than they have been in the past. Interestingly enough, they said if you're putting in a gas boiler, the building that you put it into does not have to be as efficient as it would if it were electrically heated. So they're allowing people to build new construction that will be less efficient than the electric construction and will be hooked onto gas. You may be getting a pattern here. And then there are 2 other decisions. They took the mass save plan, the DPU took the mass save plan that was put forward by the utilities, and they made 3 changes in it, in the plan that the utilities proposed. They cut the amount of money that the utilities could spend in outreach to low-income and environmental justice communities. They extended the incentives for high-efficiency gas and oil burners and furnaces 3 years into the future when the utilities had been willing to drop it. And they refused the Cape Light Compact, which is the deliverer of mass save on the Cape, their proposal to subsidize residential solar. And that's where this ruling came out about the law. The DPU said, they didn't quite say we'd love to do it, but they said we can't do it. 3 decisions, all in one direction. And finally, there's about a year ago, the Attorney General asked for a review of the future of gas in the Commonwealth. And they asked, Maura Healey asked the Department of Public Utilities to look into it. The DPU said, great idea. We know just the people to look into this. And so they asked the gas companies to hire an independent consultant to do a report on the future of gas. And you're not going to believe this, but that report came out and they looked at 8 scenarios, one of which involved replacing gas with electric throughout. And they decided that was the least cost effective and most disruptive, and that the scenarios that they wanted to go forth with were all ones that involved the continuation of the gas system going into the future. And for the most part, the incorporation of hydrogen and biomethane into the system to provide an offset to carbon and to carbon emissions, although they call it decarbonized gas, and we have suggested that it's less carbonized gas because it still emits carbon, which at least in plain English says it's not decarbonized, it's less so. So those 5 decisions, in our view, and not just our organization, sort of have a tilt towards taking the law that was passed last year that Sabrina talked about, it's called the roadmap law, and before the plan is made for the roadmap, locking gas into our future. And from our point of view, this has gone from being an effort to move towards the future, which I described earlier on the mass save side of things, to in part a move to prevent the gas companies from doing an end run around that law and locking themselves into our future going forward. We are developing with other people legislation to deal with those questions. So what we heard in the middle of this presentation is the technical approach to how to retrofit homes. And I'll repeat what I said earlier. To meet the state's goals, that has to happen essentially in every home that is not already heated by electricity. It has to happen at the rate of something over 100,000 units a year. And that itself is an enormous project. But there's another project going on as well, which is to try to lock the gas system into our future and make us pay for it. And in effect, prevent the decarbonization of part of the economy. And those are political issues, not technical ones, although understanding the technical side is really important. And that's what we're working on in 350, and we're working on with Mothers Out Front and with many other organizations in the Commonwealth to try and make sure we can get the technical support that the homeowners will need and tenants and others will need to make the retrofits happen, and that we do not have the political power of some of the people who are selling fossil fuels to us block us from that future. So that completes my part of this. I'll be happy to talk about the policy side of things, and also have it from my previous experience. If we want to talk about how Mass Save actually works and how it could work, I can bring some light to that as well.
Can I just add one bit of context quickly, which is I pulled data to find out, okay, if we're supposed to do this at 100,000 a year, how are we doing? How many did we do in 2020? And after working with Mass Save and with the various state agencies that have run programs, the number for 2020 was 461 homes in Massachusetts that were completely electrified. There were thousands that were partially electrified in the sense that they were electrified but kept their gas or oil systems. But 461 was the number.
Yes. And for those of you who missed second grade math, that's a lot less than 100,000.
Turns out.
Thank you, Mark. Incredible how you are able to summarize in a very short time, very complex issues. And of course, there are many more questions than answers at this point. What we will now do is we will first address the questions in the chat box. But if you have to make a very urgent, so there will be a question and answer. But if you want to comment on the answer or have an additional question, you can raise your hand, and I can see if I can handle 87 participants. So let's see how it goes. Ralph, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks for all the comments and the questions. I don't know that I'll be able to get to everything, but I will start, and I'll go in order as they were entered, based on who was speaking at the time. So first, Sabrina, a couple of things. One was a comment. Barbara Parmenter entered it saying, thank you for your reporting. But I would just say on behalf of 350 Mass, thank you for your reporting.
Oh,
because,
very kind.
Yeah, you and your colleagues that, articles appear and then they're all over our Slack channels and people are sharing them. And we appreciate having that kind of support for what we're aiming to accomplish. Then a question, Philip actually asked this, but I'll add to it. He sees Nextdoor, the social networking service, where he sees a lot of negative reactions to heat pumps. I'll add that I do, whether I should or not, I read the comments to the Globe articles. Not only are a lot of them negative, but they're downright hostile. And can you just speak to that? I mean, we talk a lot about the industry that we have to fight, but there's a lot of, the public is also part of the problem.
People have big feelings about it. Yeah, I mean, I stay out of the comments myself because they get personal sometimes too. I would say this, people are very emotionally connected to the way that they heat their homes. I think for whatever reason, this conversation provokes a very visceral response in people. It also is sort of a dog whistle of sorts about climate change. And so if you are someone who is feeling threatened by being told you have to change the way that you live your life, and it's about climate change and you're not kind of on board with the general consensus around these things, then this feels like an attack on you. Like me saying, this is what this, the state of the science is, this is what the state is saying we need to do, is in a way saying, it's not really, but they might be interpreting it as saying like, you're doing something wrong. You are offending the system by continuing with your gas or oil system. And so people don't like that. And they respond, really emotionally.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to move to,
Dave,
Can I-
Sorry.
can I add to that? So I do webinars like this, much longer versions, probably about once a month or so. And I frequently get comments, like Sabrina was just saying, where people are angry because they feel like they were misled by a contractor who installed heat pumps, maybe one of those two contractors that John didn't mention, who installed heat pumps, and they found their bills have doubled. This is the most common complaint I hear from people. It's not they don't like heat pumps, they like the heating, they like the integration with the fossil fuel furnace. It's the cost. And this is what I think has been missing from the debate. Heat pumps are not a magic wand. They're not going to work for everyone all the time. What John did is very, very sensible. Keep the fossil fuel furnace. What I did is very sensible too. Keep the fossil fuel furnace, let it come on. When the temperature gets low enough, the heat pumps become very inefficient, because at that temperature, you're just going to be spending a fortune on your heat pumps to heat your house. So I think the sort of messianic, electrify everything, every house has to have heat pumps, is not right. And in fact, it needs to be circumscribed by the economic circumstances. So for instance, if you go from heating with natural gas today to heating with Eversource or National Grid electricity and heat pumps, your heating bills will double.
So thank you, Dave. We have 2 raised hands, and after that we will move to the next chat question. Thank you very much, Bruce.
Yes, I'd like to support what Mark was saying about this is complicated. Take my house, take your house. The state, Mass Save, has to figure out how to make this let me call it a Manhattan project. To get 100,000 homes, there has to be a Manhattan project scale thing that goes, you know what I mean by the Manhattan project? This has to be huge. And it's not even a fight with the gas companies. We have to realize how big this project is, and we need to do it. Whatever there's now a law that says this has to happen. So we have to raise hell about this. That this is not happening. As Sabrina just said, less than 1,000 homes last year. This is a travesty. So we got to get angry about this in order for it to work. And what Mark said, I just want to say one more time, these people that get hired by the state need to be technically qualified to consult with people. I've had a Mass Save audit at my house. I know what they come in. They hand me some some light bulbs, and they do this and that. This is a technical problem. It's also political. It's obviously political. So I'll stop. I could go on, but anyway, backing up.
Thank you, Bruce. You raised so many hands that everybody has to be very brief. So Mark.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Mark.
I'll see how brief I can be. I think we need, what the 2 projects that were described are ideal projects for this. Duct systems were already in place. For an air conditioner, they were replacing at the time of failure of the central air conditioning system, and they decided to leave their existing heating system in place as a backup. If we were running the program rationally, what we'd be doing is looking for those houses right now, the people who are in that situation, because that's the easiest replacements to get, and you're going to have the best outcomes. And then we've got 10 to 15 years to do this, but that's 10 to 15 years. Heat pumps, air conditioners fail in 10 to 15 years. So you can get them at the time of replacement. Insulation never fails, so you just have to do that when you can do it. But heat pumps, if we had a rule that said central air has to be replaced by a heat pump, and you have to have a technician that sizes it properly to heat the house, and they have to notice whether you need air sealing and insulation and get you a good contractor to do that. And we trained all the contractors to do that. And they had that nifty device that John has, which automatically switches back and forth to save you money. We'd have much higher popularity of these
Mark,
things.
it's called a thermostat.
Yeah, I know. Well, I know.
It's not
But it has to be
sophisticated.
properly set, and you have to go. Yeah, I
Okay, Mark.
understand.
Oh,
There's
Mark,
an
we
easy
have
way
to
do
move
it.
on. Thank you.
Yeah,
Helena.
I'd like to echo or follow up on what David Green just said a moment ago about the operating costs. I think that we don't talk enough about them. when I looked at the cost, well, before the Guacamarol in Ukraine and so on, right? When I look at the cost of electricity and compared it with the cost of gas, it was clear to me that all things being equal, heating your house with a heat pump, just based on the cost of electricity, will cost probably about 40–50% more than heating it with gas. Okay, now prices are changing. Maybe it will be different in the near future. But what's happening is that there is such an enthusiasm among the evangelists of electrification that nobody wants to talk about cost. And I think the result is doing this service to the overall project that we want to see, transition to heat pumps. Because when people install heat pumps and then they find out that their monthly costs of heating are going through the roof, they're going to write on Nextdoor and say to everybody who will listen, don't do it. This is a very bad idea. They talk you into it, don't do it. So what we need to tell people before they install heat pumps is to insulate their house. And unfortunately, the whole evangelical movement about electrification, for the most part, doesn't want to talk about insulation. And I hear it from high-level people at City Hall and so on, electrify, electrify, electrify. And I say, insulate, 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 then electrify. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Helena. Unfortunately, the more and more hands come up, and that is difficult to handle. So I want to go back to Ralph, and maybe Ralph, you have one of the comments in the chat box, because we promised to handle those first. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Some of these questions should be pretty direct. For Jonathan, Steve asked, when you said you could have put mini splits all over the house, he asked, well, how many mini splits would you have needed for your house?
Oh, yeah. So they were sort of getting clever with them, and they were going to duct them into multiple rooms, but I needed about 8, I think was the number.
Okay.
So it was like 1 in each bedroom, -2, so 6. No, it must have been 10. 4. No, it was 8. 8 is correct. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Steve also asked, would there have been a similar break-even point if the backup system were electric resistance heat?
No, because essentially at a low enough temperature, heat pumps basically act exactly like electrical resistance heat, right? That's essentially what's happening. When the coefficient of performance is 1, back to that chart we had, it's basically performing exactly like electrical resistance heat, which is always the most expensive.
All right, good. And yeah. Philip asked, what if you want to get off gas completely?
It's really a matter of money, right? So for me, I was able to reduce, so I didn't go quite as far to get to the 100%, but we reduced our gas consumption by 50%. Really inexpensive. I went to a, especially for those of you who are Newton Power Choice, 100% renewable is a couple of cents. I mean, it was very, very short dollars for that. And then I got an electric car. And so, I got rid of most of it for not very much money. To get rid of that extra sort of, let's say 20% of all my emissions that I have left, it would have cost me $2,000 a year. There are just better ways to cut those emissions than to spend that $2,000. Like you could invest in other types of things if that's what you want to do.
I see David nodding. Maybe you want to add to this point, David?
Yes, I just completely agree. This really goes back to Mark's point that for this to work at 100,000 units per year scale, we need people at MassSafe who can talk about all of these things, or at least heat pumps, solar panels, and insulation. MassSafe has been very, very good at insulation and air sealing in the past, But really, in order to make this work, they have to be able to advise about heat pumps and about solar panels, because the way you avoid these high bills from switching from natural gas heat to electric heat pump heat, the way you avoid the high bill is you put solar panels in at the same time. My solar panels generate electricity at between 5 and 8 cents per kilowatt hour, 1/4 of what it costs to buy it from National Grid or Eversource. So when you combine that low cost electricity coming from solar panels with the efficiency of a heat pump, that's how you get to zero.
David, do you have battery storage at your house?
I do not. I'm in the process of buying it, and the battery is a whole other topic. But with batteries are best used to replace backup generators. My backup generator has failed, so I need to replace it. It's much better to get a battery to replace it. Again, the economics are favorable now, and the economics of batteries are favorable only when you install a battery with a solar panel array. The subsidies for batteries are keyed off the kilowatt hours produced by the solar panel array. So installing a battery on its own is going to be very expensive, but installing a battery with a solar panel array is going to be very affordable. And that's what I'm doing.
Okay, but here's a dumb question. How does, and I'm sorry to be a journalist jumping in with questions right now, but I can't, it's my job.
So Sabrina, can you wait one moment?
It's just quickly about batteries, but sure.
I wanted to ask David that if you have a good electric car in front of your house, you have a battery. The two-way charging is coming to the market, so that will be your battery for several days.
No, you're exactly
sorry
right.
to interrupt you, Sabrina.
No,
Well,
it's
let me
okay.
answer your question, because I've ordered a Ford F-150 for exactly that reason. I have a Tesla. It's a great car. I love it. But the F-150, I can plug it into my house, and then I have a 100 kilowatt hour battery sitting on 4 wheels in my drive. Whereas when I buy one, I buy a battery today, it's a 15 kilowatt hour battery.
Right. Exactly. So Sabrina.
Well, I was just curious, like how does your system work right now if you don't have battery in the nighttime?
Net metering. So during the day, on a sunny day like today, I generate far more electricity from my solar panels than I use. Eversource, my utility company, keeps track of that because I have a net meter that records the amount of electricity I use net of the amount of electricity I produce, and I get a credit on my bill for every kilowatt hour I export to the grid. So during the summertime, I build up those credits, and then during the wintertime, I pull them down to power the house in wintertime.
Thank you. That's a great answer.
Okay, I'm going to ask a few more questions of John, but as we just did, David, you can jump in. We'll give John the first shot because these are questions that were asked as he was speaking. So regarding cold weather performance and our New England issue, that a lot of people say that they're not going to get heat pumps because of that. Yet we know cold climate performance has performed dramatically over the past 10 plus years. So what might be current best rules of thumb for talking to friends and neighbors about that?
So the best conversation, I think, really comes in through your air conditioning has failed. What do you do now? Because what that does is, or your air conditioning needs replacement, what do I do next? And the reason for that is because, so my expense system was expensive. We spent $35,000 on the system, but I would have had to spend close to $30,000 to replace the air conditioners anyway. So that's, so if I'm looking at sort of the cost, if I were to do them on their own without sort of anything else, it would be crazy. But because I had to replace equipment, then it becomes viable to do. So really the question comes in, and now actually you're at the position where with the new mass save subsidies, it's actually cheaper to get a heat pump than it is an air conditioner. And so the answer is you can get a cheap heat pump for cheaper than your air conditioner. You leave your heater in place, and then, hey, I can show you how you can save money with it, because over 35 degrees, it's actually cheaper to heat with electric than it is with gas, with a heat pump than it is with gas. It's only when you get down. And so the answer is just leave it in place. Don't worry about it. You already have a furnace, just use it when it's cold.
All right. I'll mention too that in case folks hadn't seen this in chat, Sabrina mentioned NEEP, Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership, as a very good resource on cold climate heat pumps. ashp.neep.org. So thank you.
They also
Sabrine.
have as a resource a guide of questions to ask a contractor when you're going into an appraisal about getting heat pumps, and it's just like a little checklist of things to ask.
Great. I'll take advantage of that to say that we did attach a list of resources, and when people registered and got the confirmation email, a lot of it's very practical advice in a lot of different sites all around. I didn't have NEEP in it, so thanks. We will add that for the next version of it. John, sticking with the air conditioning question, Helena Brown asked, since you're using the air conditioning ducts, does your hot air enter the room from the ceiling area? And if it does, how do you move it down to the lower level?
So on my first floor, it actually comes up from the floor. So that's first floor is not a problem. I can say it's a really good question, but I haven't actually noticed that it's been a problem at all. So I don't know how it gets done. I just know the room is comfortable, so it hasn't been a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I know, given sort of time, we only have a few minutes left. I've answered a lot of questions. I know you're doing them in order, but I think it would be great to move on to David and everybody else.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, David, someone had David Rittenhouse asked, have you had issues with snow covering the heat pumps?
No, I have not. It is recommended that you put them up a little bit, about 12 inches off the ground, to stop snow from building up from the ground level, but I've not had problems. All modern heat pumps come with a defrost cycle. So temporarily they'll actually go into air conditioning mode, even in the middle of winter time, just to warm up the outdoor units to melt any frost off them. So I've not had any problems whatsoever with snow. Even when we had that record snow, 6 feet of snow that choked up downtown Boston a few years back, I've had no problems.
Okay. Also about heat pumps, John Brown said that he lives in a townhouse where his neighbors will be able to hear a heat pump compressor. It'll be essentially out their back windows. And is volume a problem? Are they loud to the point where it's going to really annoy people in a townhouse setting?
No, my Bosch heat pumps are very quiet, but they do make a little bit of noise. I would say less noise than an air conditioning unit, but they make a little bit of noise. The Mitsubishi pumps at my rental house are actually incredibly quiet, and you'd be hard pressed to hear them, hear them at all 20 feet away. They're very, very quiet indeed. I don't think there'd be any issues in a downtown setting. You got far more background noise from dogs and road traffic than you'll ever get from the heat pumps.
Okay. Another question from Letitia Upton about central air. If your central air is working and you have gas, does it make more sense to wait till something breaks before chucking the old system and going to heat pumps?
Is that for me? The answer is yes. Yes, I mean, I think John would completely agree with this. The best time, I mean, the economically best time to install heat pumps is when your air conditioning unit fails. And it could be because the refrigerant leaks out like John's did, or you can't get it, you can't get Freon anymore, you have to go with R410A. Like whatever it is, when your air conditioning unit fails, that is the time to buy a heat pump, because as John says, the subsidies now are so good on heat pumps, it's like the cost is the same. It costs you no more now to replace your AC unit with a heat pump than it does to replace your AC unit with an AC unit. So I think, and Mark said this from a policy point of view, I really think we should be targeting the breakdown of air conditioning units as the point at which to get heat pumps, and not just blanket everyone with the idea you should take out perfectly good equipment, a perfectly good furnace, and replace it with a heat pump, because for many people, that's going to double their electricity bills, double their heating bills.
Okay, great, thank you. Question from Max Rome. Any general advice for a home without ducts? There's no central air, no steam radiators, just as starting the project.
Yeah, so it can be done. If you have radiators, there are now, as John alluded to, there are heat pump to hot water systems. They're made by different companies to the air conditioning companies. The air conditioning companies like Mitsubishi, Trane, Carrier, American Standard, they make heat pumps, they make AC units. But the companies that make the heat pumps that go to hot water systems, there's three of them. There's Jaga, Jaga, there's Daikin, Daikin, and there's Spacepak, Spacepak. They all make air source heat pump to forced hot water baseboard radiator systems. I've never installed one, but I hear they're pretty good. So you can definitely do this. And I think there's a bit more of your question I forgot. What was the other part of your question?
Any general advice for home without ducts?
Oh, so if you've got no ducts at all, so the most cost-effective way to do it is actually do it from the basement and from the attic. So you heat the ground floor as John is with ductwork, that new ductwork you install that goes through the basement and up through the floor, and the same thing from the attic. You go through the attic and down through the walls into the upper floor. No good if you've got a triple decker, but it works fine if you've got just a two-story house. If you don't have any way of using ductwork whatsoever, then you need to go with mini splits. Room by room, which, as John said, it can get expensive. I had the same experience as John at our rental house. We have 8 indoor heads running off 3 outdoor units, and that cost me $50,000 to put that system in for a smaller house than my house, which is just 2 air conditioning units, 1 upstairs, 1 downstairs, 2 heat pumps, I'm sorry, 1 upstairs, 1 downstairs, with a forced hot air system. So the mini splits, they work very well, but they're much more expensive than the ducted systems if you have a ducted system. If you don't have ductwork, it's too expensive to put it in. So then you really have to be going with a ductless system, which is going to be more expensive per house than a ducted system.
Can I jump in for a sec on that? I will say from a personal perspective, before I came to the Boston Globe, we were in a situation where our gas boiler was dying. And I live in Maine. So it was winter, so it was a little desperate. And so we started getting, we do not have a ducted home. We live in a 2,000 square foot home with open space on the ground floor and then small bedrooms upstairs. And we started getting estimates for mini splits. It was incredibly expensive. So far, I mean, way more than double of what it was going to cost to replace a gas boiler. And, you know, as a representative of the middle class here, it was not even remotely in reach for my family. And then, of course, lo and behold, a few months later, I'm here reporting on heat pumps almost full time, kicking myself and wishing that we had figured out a way to do it. But I feel like I represent the reality for a lot of people, because we have this interesting conundrum that doesn't get talked about that much. I mean, Massachusetts state plan right now is saying, okay, there's like 1 million homes that are expected to have their home heating fail between now and 2030. That represents our target audience for conversion. And yet y'all are talking about how it makes the most sense to do this work when your air conditioner fails. I don't know that is being taken into account with these plans. And at the same time, for folks like myself who do not have those air conditioner units, you are looking at a very significant cost. And yes, MassSave is stepping up what it's doing, but we're also hearing that if you're going to completely be replacing your system with heat pumps, you may be looking at very high bills. And so there are all these dynamics in here that, especially when you're talking about low and moderate income folks, are going to hit really hard. And to see this transition of 1 million buildings converted in the next now 7 years, there's a lot of hard questions that have to get figured out.
Thank you, Sabrina. Ralph, do you
Yes.
think we can move on to the questions from Mark's presentation, or do we still have unanswered
There's still
questions?
some specifics. And Philip, we can keep going past 8:30, at least the
Sure,
yeah,
but,
the presenters stuff. But yeah, but let's try that. So let's see sorry, just looking. Okay, so there was a question about some of these are more comments about the future of gas, which is a hell of a title for the project. And so just a general comment about the politics of all this, and that it's a time where we should all be thinking about who we're going to support in elections and try to get the right people elected. John Mahoney, who was attending, said that he's happy to discuss with people about what the Massachusetts Democratic and the US Democratic Party can offer on that. Let's see, why is community-owned solar not available to complement heat pump solutions for people who cannot install on their home? And will community solar be an adequate substitute for those who cannot put up rooftop solar?
Yes, let me take that one. So the answer is community solar is available to anyone with an electric bill. So if you've got an apartment where you don't have the roof space to do solar panels, you can get community solar. The cheapest community solar you can get right now is from a company called Nexamp, Nexamp, and they sell electricity at about 12.5% discount to Eversource rate. So roughly 20 cents per kilowatt hour, down from 24 cents on the regular Eversource tariff. And that's because they build solar panels, but solar panel arrays in fields in sort of poor agricultural areas of Massachusetts. So you are getting real solar production really in Massachusetts. Those are two big advantages, and it is 12.5% cheaper than Eversource or National Grid electricity. The only disadvantage is still 20 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's a big discount to Eversource and National Grid, but my solar panels are making solar electricity for me at between 5 and 8 cents per kilowatt hour. So 20 cents is not a huge reduction. And for many people, it won't be enough of a reduction to have heat pumps make financial sense for them. It'll be better than paying for National Grid or Eversource electricity. But in order to get solar electricity to break even with a heat pump running on National Grid or Eversource, you need the electricity to be about 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So your solar panels or your community source solar need to be giving you electricity at about 10 cents a kilowatt hour. And there is no community source solar provider in Massachusetts who's even close to that. The cheapest is Nexamp, and they're about 20 cents. There are 3 or 4 others at 21, 22 cents, about a 10% discount to Eversource. But you can do it. That's often the best option for a tenant.
Yes, thank you, David. So before I give Mark the opportunity to say something, I want to give the floor to John Klein, who has to leave in a few minutes, and to thank John, but also give him the opportunity to say a closing word from his side. John.
Yeah, I think that this has been a great conversation because there are a lot of pitfalls here. The doubling of your cost, if you really just move to heat pumps wholesale, the cost, I mean, there's a lot of reasons not to do it, but then there are a lot of reasons to do it. And it's about it's about having the right project. And I'm quite sure that if my air conditioner did not fail, I would still be running on natural gas right now. But I was lucky enough to care about it enough to figure it out. That's the message. That's the reason why I did this, is I want to get that message out to everybody else so that every other air conditioner that fails turns into a heat pump opportunity.
So we are grateful that you share your experiences with us, John, and I'm sure that we will find you if we need you for advice. And thank you very much. And now I want to continue our conversation about, give Mark the floor about the cost of electricity. We are talking about solar power, solar sharing. What was it?
Yeah,
Mark, pick it up.
Yeah, let me just take one step back. To get to our home, approximately hundreds of thousands of air conditioners, heat pumps, mini splits are being installed. Tens of thousands are being installed in Massachusetts right now. And sort of the key to get from the 461 miserable performance of 2020 that Sabrina quoted to what we need is to take advantage of the trend that is working, which is people are putting in air conditioning because it's getting hot because of, you know, global warming. And those systems, at least the mini split ones, are heat pumps by and large. And you could easily have central air be all heat pumps as well. So you'd be getting partial solutions, as both of our speakers talked about. Things where you've moved from I'm heating with 100% fossil fuel to I'm heating with 30% or 20% or 10%, depending on your condition. And that's the key strategically and policy-wise to getting from the numbers that we've got to the numbers that we need. We're not going to convince people, and we shouldn't be convincing people, to switch to a heat pump that's going to double their heating bill. But as David, the ones who aren't are with relatively lower cost installations where people already have ductwork and who have access to solar or some other means of reducing the cost of their electricity. So I think that's the framework you got to see. It's not one size fits all, but it's a flexible system that takes people from where they are to where they need to be. That's what we need.
Thank you, Mark.
Massachusetts has a bunch of historic, let me just answer on solar. We've got the rules that we have around promoting solar were designed when solar was expensive. And there are all sorts of restrictions on it, when you can do the net metering thing, where you can do for true community solar, where a bunch of people own a system that's in their neighborhood, but it's not on their house. Those rules have to be gone through line by line. We've started to work on this and changed to one where we say solar is cheap if you own it.
Yeah.
And we want to, and we want to encourage it, because what happens when David Green buys his system, he's saving money, and Eversource doesn't have to build that much generation capacity because he's taking care of himself. So it's a win-win for both society and for David, but he had the access to capital and the business background to make it happen. Mass Save has to be where you call up and they say, oh, let me look at your house. Oh, you've got shading. It's not going to work. Let me hook you up with a community solar group that's being put together. They don't do that, but they could.
Right. So it's 8:30 and we actually discussed with the speakers that they could hang on till 9 o'clock if the discussion was so rich, and it is a fantastic and very rich discussion. So we will hang on, and please hang on with us if you want to. And thanks for the speakers to give so much of their time. At this point, I would like to give the floor to Scott Rodman, who has had his hand up for such a long time. And then we will revert to the questions asked to Mark. Or Scott, are you still there? Ah.
Hi, Philip. My apologies. I just left my hand up. This tonight has been fantastic. First of all, thanks to all the volunteers who've been wonderful in arranging all of these discussions and doing work with the legislature and working on the net metering code and so forth. I think it all starts with the envelope. We're building a new net zero passive house, and I'm going through the whole process right now of trying to decide on a heating system, and I'll try and be quick. And I'm thrilled. Somebody asked a question about Dandelion. Dandelion is in Massachusetts now. It is in the eastern part of the state, and we're working with them to look at whether that's an option. The cost is way down from what I was told when I got bids from other people on using geothermal, substantially down, and we're getting excited about that. By the way, we're filming the entire process of this house for a YouTube series because I want to make sure we actually show people what can be done. And our architect is one of those gurus who I'm very pleased we have, Steve Bazek, who we're lucky to have him as a partner in that. But one of the biggest issues I'm fighting with the legislature about, and I'm talking fast to get through this quickly, is net metering. The 10 kW cap on net metering that was memorialized in the climate bill creates this donut hole when they solved it for classes 2 and 3 solar above 60 kW, but they left this donut hole between 10 and 60. At the same time that they're trying to encourage more EVs, heat pumps, and so forth. And so there's a dichotomy there that you've got basically telling one thing on one side, a push, and then you've got the economic push back on the other, where you're losing 40% of your net metering from zero. And in this particular in this state where we have a climate, a climate that we do, we generate an awful lot more in the summer. To David's question about batteries also, I have 3 batteries on the house in Newton it's the 3rd solar array I've done, and I've learned tremendous amount, and I suffered from inertia before starting that. And the battery process is, I think, a key. The price is too high, but participation in connected solutions where you dump your power back to the grid at night is an absolute key to try and balance out demand and supply. And I think we've got to have better knowledge and understanding of that and an enhanced program. But a lot of this starts between the fights between DPU, DOER, and so forth. And Mass Save is a massive challenge to deal with. And I have a lot more, but I'll leave it at that for tonight.
Thank you, Scott. Kurt, do you want to react directly to this?
Different idea.
Different idea? Okay, then you have to wait a little bit. back to Ralph.
Yeah, a few pretty specific questions for David. Helena Brown said if,
Oh,
sorry.
I think we should go back to Mark, given the time, Ralph.
Oh, I think Mark is kind of, I didn't see too much. Well,
Okay.
I mean, a lot of the comments were sort of people discussing with one another, political and financing issues.
Okay. And in that case, we go to Kurt, and then we
Yep,
go back
yeah,
to David.
okay, sure.
Okay, thanks. I'm reflecting on something Mark said really early on. Seems like it was so long ago, about Mass Save not being set up to do this kind of holistic, full house, retrofit planning. And, Sabrina, your comment about what it was like, to sort of contemplate trying to take this stuff on. I believe that there was discussion with our legislative friends that like, maybe Mass Save just is not up for this, and I'm wondering if somebody can speak, maybe this is Mark, what the prospects are to make this not so damn hard for people to take on. I feel like if it's going to take, 40 hours of a homeowner's time and 15 different phone calls, nobody's going to volunteer to do that except for the brave souls such as we've assembled here.
I think that we need two things to make this happen on scale. One is that Mass Save be revamped to provide this kind of expertise in one-stop shop with an easy phone call. We do that. Mass Save does that with insulation and air sealing, which, believe me, when we started it 25 years ago, was awfully complicated. It took a while to make it simple. You can do it again. The other thing that has to happen is there have to be some policy changes where the utilities are encouraged, incentivized to do this kind of work. Now, I'll cite one example that hasn't been mentioned. People have talked about ground source heat pumps as being way too expensive because you have to drill the well. Well, there's this idea, not mine, but a great idea, which says, why don't we have the gas companies put in geothermal loops that people could hook a ground source heat pump onto, so that you get, for not much more expense than you get a regular heat pump, you get access to ground source heat pump, which is more efficient and a lower drain on the electric system. Great idea. Legislation to that effect is going through. So you need both the infrastructure that helps people, works people through this process, and some changes in the legal structure that allows us to get into the next generation of power.
I will add though, so after some of my reporting on Mass Save, one of the stories that I did was speaking with legislators about, what they were proposing. If they were not happy with Mass Save, what did they think was a better structure? And there is a very lively conversation around this. Some of the ideas included like creating a structure in which there's a group of people making decisions around Mass Save, and a representative from Mass Save can have a seat at the table, but will not be kind of the end all be all when it comes to those decisions. Technically there is the board, the EEAC, the state board that oversees Mass Save, but they've historically not had a whole lot of ability to like shape where things are going. Although, there seems to have been some, success this time around. But yeah, there's a really big conversation. There's also conversations about saying maybe Mass Save just isn't it. Maybe Mass Save is no longer, it was a very, very successful tool for a very long time around energy efficiency, but maybe it doesn't make sense for the utilities to be the ones deciding this. They do definitely need to be a part of it, but do they need to be helming this process is another question. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of more developments around this question and like more refining of it. I do believe that the fact that the Mass Save plan came as far as it did probably puts the brakes on that a little bit, because it indicates that if pushed, if there's legislation and there is a quantifiable way of pushing them by saying you have to reduce this much emissions or whatever it may be, that they can get there. And so I don't know. I think it's definitely really interesting, but the question you're asking, I think, is a really good one, which is there are throughout across Massachusetts and nationally too, there are a lot of systems that have existed for a long time that made a lot of sense when they were created. But what we're doing now is we're facing a brand new challenge around climate change, and we're trying to jam these solutions into the climate change space and just make it work. And we'll pull it this way and that way and Frankenstein it into the right thing, instead of saying like, wait, like maybe we need to just push the pause button and rethink it, soup to nuts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But
This raised 4 hands. Let's first ask Bill and Jackie if this is on this point. Bill and Jackie Judd.
I want to address Mark's point.
Oh.
We just attended a webinar tonight where Eversource is going into Framingham, and they're going to set up a pilot project of ground source heat pumps and do the whole area. They're going to replace people's heating systems for quote unquote free, and they're going to go do a whole section. So there is a model being developed that we can use geothermal without the individual people having to do the work. So we need to press that model, and you can go on Eversource's website and take a look at it and see if we can make a regulations or law to extend the process.
Thank you. It is incredibly important that we take that also into account. But of course, geothermal is not possible everywhere. But yeah, thank you for this insight. Kurt?
I was writing in the chat. We've also been very focused on the homeowner consumer side of this equation. But if there's not an order of magnitude scale up on the workforce side as well, we're going to be real disappointed. And I hope as there's thought going on this holistic possible reset around mass save, there's people who are working just as hard on the workforce side of things.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. That's very important. John Brown?
Sorry, had to unmute. Yeah, so speaking of rethinking, I don't think anyone's mentioned the Green Futures Act tonight. I don't know the specific details, but I know that a major component of that is basically a price on carbon, which is also a carbon tax. And that is a real way of rethinking this, because with a price on carbon or carbon tax, gas gets more expensive than renewable electricity, because there's a tax on gas and there's not a tax on renewable electricity. And rather quickly, all of a sudden, there's not this debate about, oh my gosh, if I have a heat pump, it's going to cost more. It won't cost more. Gas is going to cost more because it's going to get taxed. At that point, it just becomes a no-brainer for everyone. You don't have to be making all these policies for this and that. It also works for cars. You want to buy an EV because gasoline is going to get taxed, et cetera. Anyway, it's a big lift politically, but it really is worth it if we could do anything like that.
Yes, thank you, John. And the carbon tax, of course, is a whole new can of worms. It also has its protagonists and its adversaries. And we probably should have a separate webinar about that in the near future. But thank you. Harvey?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that came up, and I really appreciate this because I'm at MIT. I have a paper due in a week, and this is really helping me frame it. But we need to get 100,000 homes a year doing this in Massachusetts, and there are paths to do it. If we don't do it, game over. I mean, basically, there's no solution to climate without dealing with heat. And if Massachusetts, with the legislation has done, and our history and our capability, we don't get an easy path that everybody's happy with to 100,000 homes a year transitioning, then no state's going to follow us. And the world doesn't have a solution, at least for areas in cold climates. But the good news is that there are solutions. We started talking about air conditioning a lot today, and it's really great because as Sabrina pointed out, the whole Massachusetts work to date has ignored the air conditioning side of the equation. There are 1.5 million homes in Massachusetts that use window air conditioners, and they would love ductless mini splits. And you know what? Ductless mini splits cost less than $2,000 a ton to buy, and the incentive is $2,000 a ton. So you start with something that costs below zero. What we have to do now is deal with things like the workforce problem that Kurt described, because that $1,500 ton mini split costs you $5,000 a ton by the time you put it into your house, and it shouldn't cost that much. So like the way Solarize and other things made the solar industry work, we brought the soft costs down and we made things much more able to scale. That's the way we get to 100,000 a year and everybody's happy. And regarding John Brown and the carbon tax, rest assured that when we chop off 2/3 of the heating season and make it heat pump, the gas pipes won't be able to deliver gas at anything like the price we have now, because all of the gas will have to be delivered during the coldest part of the year only, and the gas grid just isn't going to work. So it's going to be extremely expensive. That'll take care of the gas cost side. It's going to happen even if everybody does the project just like John Klein did. So we have paths. The only thing I want to encourage everybody is that we need to find a path that everybody's happy with to 100,000 a year. There is no alternative.
Thank you, Harvey. Back to
Can I
Ralph.
speak now, sir? This is Bill Judd.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I just wanted to share that about 12 years ago, we replaced all of our systems. We had an ideal number 7 boiler in the basement, window AC units, and we went to a mini split heat pump in the basement. And we went to basically continuing to use our radiators in the rest of the house. So the system worked very, very well. The problem was the natural gas, which was over $400 a month, dropped to about $40 a month, but the electricity rose to over $400 a month. So that was one thing that we hadn't planned on. I mean, the offset in terms of our monthly utility bill is about the same, but I just wanted to make clear that that's where we went with a Mitsubishi mini split 12 years ago. Now that unit failed 3 weeks ago and we just replaced it. And it was about $5,400 to get every bell and whistle on that thing that you could get to get it installed. But a couple of things I wanted to share with everybody who are considering mini splits. In Massachusetts, I wouldn't put them on the ground. I wouldn't even put them 12 inches off the ground. The last one drove me crazy having to dig it out because of drifts. If you put it 18 inches or higher off the ground, that's going to help you a lot. And don't let any company tell you that you do not need a pan heater in the bottom of that unit, because in New England you do. And if you don't have a pan heater and the drift gets against the unit, it's going to freeze up. So then you're going to have to go out, dig it out, get an extension cord out to it if you don't have an AC outlet, and get some type of a heating device on it, some sort of a heater or something like that. So there are benefits to them, but in terms of the trade-off on the monthly cost, us going from better than 400 on gas to better than 400 on electricity, it was kind of a net for us. Now, I think that things are a lot better with these mini splits now. And according to the SEER values and everything that are on them, we should probably knock off about $60 to $75 a month with this new mini split, because it's strictly heat and it is 100% electricity when it comes to heat. So that's basically all. Oh, I'm sorry. And my wife now has a Tesla. She's been driving for a year. She probably hasn't spent $18 to $20 to drive that car for the whole year because of the savings in electricity. She gets checks back from Eversource. So that's been such a great savings for us. Now we're considering not necessarily, well, maybe solar panel roofs, but we're really considering a solar roof system with a wall mounted battery system. So it'd be great if you guys could talk more about those types of systems, availability, rebates, and what we have going on versus all these ads that everybody keeps getting right now about, hey, solar's free in Massachusetts, just give us a call, we'll get it installed for free. What's the truth about all of that stuff? Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And In Newton, we have an energy coach who asks answers these types of questions, and I'm sure that she also will be answering from people outside Newton. So because we're all in the same boat. So Ralph, do we have questions that still need to be addressed, either for David?
I'll just do a last couple for David. We just talked about solar a little bit. Leslie Graffenius asks, does it make financial sense to install mini splits if one's roof is not suitable for solar panels?
So maybe, but probably not. If you're going to be paying 24 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity from Eversource or National Grid, then and you put in a mini split with the average COP, coefficient of performance, of about 2.5, you're going to be paying about 10 cents, maybe 8, 9, 10 cents per kilowatt hour of heat in your house. Whereas if you're heating with natural gas today, it's about 5 or 6 cents per kilowatt hour of heat in the house, and heating oil is about 8, 9, 10 cents. So it might work if you're heating with oil. But if you're heating with natural gas today, you're going to see an increase in your overall bills, just like the gentleman who was just speaking just a moment ago. He found that his increase in his electric bill exactly offset his reduction in his, I think it was his natural gas bill. That's very common in my experience, for people who are on natural gas, switching to heat pumps without solar panels, getting a big, often a nasty surprise on the heating bills. To ensure that you get both a reduction in carbon footprint and a reduction in bills, you need to do solar panels at the same time. But if you can't do that because your house is too shady, then your next best option is Nexamp, which is the community source solar at about 20 cents per kilowatt hour. It's probably still not going to get you to anywhere close to a zero bill, but it might make the pain slightly less bad.
Thank you, David.
Okay, good.
Ralph.
And one other, Susan Rutkowitz asked for David, what kind of windows do you use?
So I've got two manufacturers I use, both of which I was very pleased with. The first one is called Lowen, Loewen. They make them in Canada. They're very well made. They were very well installed. They look great. So I highly recommend them, and they weren't too bad from an expense point of view. Those are in the frame is vertical grain Douglas fir, which is a very nice kind of peaches and cream kind of coloration. It's a much nicer colored wood than pine. But if you're going to paint the frame, don't spend any money on the wood. Get pine. Pine is much cheaper. I found the best company for pine frame windows was a different company called Sierra Pacific. They're a US company. They make them in California. They also make excellent windows. They were substantially cheaper than the Lowen ones if you want pine frame windows. That's what I did for the two manufacturers. If you have decent double glazed today, there's no point ripping them out to put triple glazed in. In that case, your better solution is to use fit from the inside window inserts. There's a single pane of glass or a pane of plastic. You push fit from the inside of the house into the window frame. There's a rubber gasket around the outside, so it just fits nice and snug into the window. They're very cheap, about $200 per window for a 10 square foot window, and they will dramatically cut your heating bill, your heat loss from the windows, and they'll also greatly reduce the noise. So if you've got noisy neighbors or you've got noisy neighborhood, they're really great value for money. They also completely block the drafts from windows like double hung or single hung sash windows, which are notoriously difficult to seal because you've got that moving panel up against each other. So if you've got like drafty, noisy, double hung windows, your window inserts are going to be your best, cheapest option compared to triple glazed windows.
So thank you. And I want slowly to bring this incredible meeting to a closure by, first of all, thanking all of you to hang on for 2 hours. Then, of course, thanking the presenters for their incredible inputs. And then I would like to, I know that all the other information that David was not able to give is in his book and on his website, or contact him directly. But I would like to give all the presenters a few moments to reflect on what they have heard and maybe some good recommendations. I would like to start with Sabrina, if she's still around. Sabrina, what have you heard? What have you seen? And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think what jumps out to me the most is just the complexity of all this and the lack of a one size fits all situation. You know, we heard from two speakers about these incredible stories of what they've been able to do. But those are stories that are not necessarily accessible to wide areas. And so what my brain is thinking about is telling the story of how to close that gap and how to you know, bring those opportunities across the state and where we're failing in our efforts to do that. So hopefully you'll see more from me in the future in that space. I'll just say this was a great
maybe some interviews in the Globe with homeowners like David and John.
Well, yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm always interested to hear first person stories about that, about experiences. I think it's really helpful for people to hear. Actually, one thing I've been talking to my editor about is trying to find people who represent all different walks of life and looking at, you know, what has to happen to their personal situation to get from today in 2022 to where we want to be in 2030 to where we want to be in 2050. We're working on at the Globe, we're planning a sustainability week, which will be in mid-April with a series of great events. And the panel that I've been pitching that I think we're going to do is the carbon-free house of 2030 or 2050. I don't know how we'll pitch it exactly, but explaining and bringing experts on who can talk about what that looks like. So yeah, we're definitely more on this to come. I hope you'll all follow along with the work we're doing on the Globes Into the Red effort. Reach out to me if you've got any questions or thoughts on, I mean, I hear from a lot of 350 folks, really just like incredibly supportive and kind emails. I've been really blown away by what a warm group of people you all are. I can't tell you how much that, how nice that feels as a reporter. If you've looked at our comments after a story, you understand why those kind words can go a long way. So yeah, just thank you. I'm appreciative of being able to be involved.
Thank you, and you do incredibly important work because the Globe has a huge impact, as we all know. So thank you very much, and thank you for being here the whole evening. So I move on to David. Just a few reflections or ideas that are still on your mind.
Yeah, so one quick thing. I really think this comes down to heat pumps, insulation, triple glazed windows, and solar panels. And those are the four things that work. They've worked for everyone on this call who's had a good story to tell. They've certainly worked for me, both economically as well as cutting my carbon footprint. And the other thing I would mention is that there's a lot more information available on this. As you've seen, this is complicated. There is a YouTube version of my entire webinar, which you can watch for free. The link is on my website. You can download the slides for my full presentation. It's 45 odd slides, goes into much more detail, also available for free on my website. There are 300 written questions and answers, a goldmine of information, all free on my website. And in the book, which goes into far more detail than I've gone into even in the presentation, that's available for free. Just use the code 350 when you get to my website, and you can download either the Kindle version or the iPad version.
Thank you, David, and incredible, and thank you for making it all available for us and for your incredible insights. So Mark, the seeming last word, are you still there? You're muted. Mark is, maybe he is not here anymore. Mark, are you aware there? Otherwise, I would like to bring this meeting to a close, and again, thank you all. Especially, I want to thank Evan for his work behind the scenes, for organizing the technical aspects, getting everything going, sending the reminders, making sure that everything has been going flawless. Big applause for Evan, and then also for Ralph, who did an incredible job of monitoring all the questions in the chat box and bringing them back into the discussion. So thank you, Evan and Ralph, and all of us and the presenters, and good night, and we will see each other soon. Bye-bye.